This podcast is a Radio Mike original production. Head to radiomike.com.au to find out more.
Can't help you, Nani. I have a very full day of Earth research ahead of me.
You mean watching talk shows and reading gossip magazines?
Yeah, it takes it out of you.
Show me a move. Good news, everyone. Don't you little giddy when you see onions?
Welcome to 20th Century Boy. My name is Mike Hero Academia, and this is the inside of my mind. Welcome to the show. Every week on the show, I start with a different name, and like I said last week, loving the Mike pun ones these days. So send them in. RadioMikePod@gmail.com. Send in a name. They're hard to think of. Mike Hero Academia, of course, a reference to the TV show My Hero Academia, which is like an anime about kids with superpowers, which is obviously sick. But yeah, we've had Mike Chemical Romance, Mike Big Fat Greek Wedding, any of those, send them in. Would love a few suggestions. Welcome to 20th Century Boy. It's a podcast about me, Radio Mike, a producer and writer from here in Melbourne, just trying to make his way through life. And, this podcast, I say it every week, it's the conversations you wish you were having about the stuff that no one else cares about, because that's basically my life. All the stuff I want to talk about, no one wants to talk about, and I assume you're like me, so sit down or stand up or whatever you want to do right now and, just enjoy this weekly, nearly an hour, one-sided conversation with me. You can always get in touch with the show, radiomikepod@gmail.com, radio.mike on Instagram, @itsradiomike on Twitter, tweet about the show. Get in touch, the YouTube channel, Radio Mike. It's all there. It's all there for you guys to get in touch with the show, which helps me build the show each week. Feeling like we're in a good rhythm with the show at the moment. I will say, you would have heard the show opener there. That classic show opener that has been the show opener for the past 4.5 seasons of this show. That is the last episode of 20th Century Boy that will feature that sound. The reason for that is because it's not my song. When I started this podcast 4.5 years ago, I didn't really think that it would ever become big. And I just chose a song that I liked. It's called 20th Century Boy by T-Rex. And I can't really do that because the bigger this podcast becomes, the more risky it is for me to use that song. And I don't want one day, someone to be like, copyright, you can't use that song, bam, take every episode down. So we've commissioned a composer from Chile to compose a new podcast theme. It's really fun. We'll also do a little podcast breaking down that new intro. So that's the last time you'll ever hear that intro. We will miss you intro, but I love the new intro. We actually played a 1-second plug of it on the Pat and Mike show over on Patreon. I wonder if I've still got that on the board, because maybe, yeah, this is it. That's the 1-second plug of the new theme. So that is coming next week. Yeah, a professional TV music composer put it together. Really fun. Goodbye, old theme music. Sorry to see you go, but we need an original piece of music if we're going to continue this pod, which we are. I wanted to start the show with a little bit of this. All the write-ins that you sent in. Right into the show any time, as I said. This one comes in from one of our executive producers on Patreon. Of course, join the Patreon, patreon.com/Radio Mike, to get the Pat and Mike show every week and more bonuses coming, which I'll explain soon. Patrio Whitey said in the Discord, feel free to join the Discord, just message me. It's very funny hearing Mike talk about how old he is. I always thought it was odd when he dropped the young from the intro. I used to say I was a young writer and producer, no longer young. 28 is young relative to the vast majority of the population. That is true, but I certainly feel old, especially last week when I fell off my chair and my arm is still sore from that. Listen to last week's ep. Radio Kristen, welcome to the radio family, who last week I talked about Neopets, the old online kind of pet sim. She says, I still semi-regularly log into Neopets to play the games. They've taken lots of the games off the website recently, but up until last year, most of them still worked. That is just... Imagine that. Like, I wonder if there's an account of mine on Netflix that still exists that I could log into. No doubt my Neopets would have starved to death. They would all be dead if they can die. I don't know. But they haven't been fed, and that was the point. You would go on and feed your Neopets, and you would play games to, like, you know, to win the Neo points to pay for food for you. Crazy amount of responsibility for a kid. The best game on Neopets was a game called Meerka Chase, which was basically Snake, the old Nokia game on your brick Nokia phone. Speaking of Snake, that's a funny detour. Didn't plan on talking about this. Snake on Nokia was like my life for so long. When I was 14, I had like a Sony Ericsson phone and it broke. And then we didn't have enough money to get me a new phone. So I had to use one of my parents' old Nokia brick phones. And I'm like 14. And I was just like, this has Snake. Amazing. And I remember this was 2009. And I remember I got a score on Snake that was like 2025 or something like that. And I remember saying to myself, from now on in my life, I always have to have a higher score on Snake than the current year. So, like, currently I have that if 2025 is right. But I don't have that old Nokia brick phone. But you can play Snake on Google now. Just type in Snake. You can play it on Google. But it does get to a point, if you're really good at Snake, it does get to a point where you just end up filling the board. Like, you've now gotten too many Snake pieces that you fill up the entire board. And that, you know, sort of takes away some of the fun of, well, then the game just ends. Basically, you can beat Snake. You beat Snake by literally making the Snake too big to fit on the thing. And it's like, you win. There's no more space on this phone screen. There's no more space. You win, Snake. Well done. There's actually a lot of strategy to Snake. It's just like doing sort of, you know, up, down, left, right, up, down, like just kind of... Anyway, go watch some Snake videos. I didn't plan on talking about this shit. But Meerka Chase on Neopets, fucking hell, was like Snake. You were just a different character. Anyway, last week I asked you guys what the most pain you've ever experienced was, because I just thought there'd be some funny stories. And to be honest, not a whole lot of people wrote in about it, which makes me think either A, people don't like talking about the most pain they've ever been in, or B, people just haven't been in a lot of pain. I did have an opener for this, but in the true professionalism of this podcast, I can't find it. So I'm not going to play it. But Radio Amy, long-time listener of the show, she actually sent, because I talked about my hemorrhoids and how painful they were. She says, I'm sorry to take pleasure at your misery, but I quite literally laughed out loud at Coles when you were talking about your butthole throbbing on the recent potty. Glad my pain, my excruciating asshole pain, is funny to you, Amy. But Radio Lucy did send in a story. Let's read out her biggest pain story. She says, hey Mike, I feel like I'm verging on your stalker, but I genuinely have just become a platonic fan. We love that. I have a hilarious story for you, Pain. I moved to Melbourne in May 2021 and basically got stuck in that last lockdown as soon as I moved from Brisbane as well. Sorry, as soon as I moved from Brisbane as well. Okay, that doesn't make sense. So I hadn't even done a proper hard lockdown. Anyway, the October of that year when we left lockdown, it was the Friday Jesus Christ, Lucy, this is a terribly, maybe, I don't know. It was the Friday lockdown was lifted. Oh, it was I'm so sorry, guys. It was the Friday. Lockdown was lifted. I think that's what she meant. And I went out with my direct report from work, like I was this guy's boss at the time, and ended up jumping into a fly fishing pond. Google it. Thinking it was a swimming pool. These things are like 10 centimeters deep at best and fully concrete. Anyway, because it was the first night out of lockdown, the ambulance basically told me if I wasn't dying, then to Uber. So I ended my night in hospital and they wouldn't give me any pain relief because I was drunk. I ended up breaking my ankle and tearing ligaments and stretching muscles so badly that I was in pain for months and not able to walk. I'm actually still in heaps of pain now whenever I do heaps of exercise. Jesus Christ. I mean, that sounds, to be honest, Lucy, that actually does sound a little bit silly, because how could you have not have seen the depth of the pool or the pond or whatever it was? Very interesting. Send in your pain stories for the Pain Diary, but I'm not banking on it, to be honest. Well, we've got to talk about this, don't we? Well, I've got to talk about this. A certain children's book series turned movies is going to be rebooted as a TV series. How exciting is this? And yes, of course, I am talking about Twilight. Didn't expect that, did you? Man, I'll tell you what, they announced this week Twilight getting a TV series reboot. Off the coattails of Harry Potter getting a TV series reboot. And boy, oh boy, is this just not history repeating itself? And Twilight fans, brace yourself, because you're not going to like what I'm about to say. Twilight was like the first of a series of young adult dystopian supernatural fantasy novels adapted to films to try and cash in on the success of Harry Potter. That is a fact. Now, I'm not talking about the quality of the movies. I'm sure if you grew up watching Twilight, they're very nostalgic to you, and that's fantastic. But here's the thing. Harry Potter was just a phenomenon. Unbelievably successful financially, commercially, critically, all of the above, right? And it still is today. And when people start seeing that success, they're like, we need our own Harry Potter. We need this. This is how we're going to make heaps of money. Twilight came, and then it all steamrolled after that. All were trailblazing after Harry Potter. Twilight. And to be honest, and this is going to piss people off, none of them were remotely, both books and films, none of these series that I'm about to mention were remotely on par with Harry Potter. They were all, and that's not saying they were bad, it's just that Harry Potter was very good. All of these copycat franchises, or just franchises that were like, you know, we need to find the next Harry Potter. Where's like a book series that's good that kids will love that we can make money off? And it began, right? Twilight, awful. The Hunger Games, didn't finish it. Jennifer Lawrence in those movies, awful. Hated her. Seriously, Jennifer Lawrence in Hunger Games, quite possibly some of the worst acting I have ever seen. After that, Maze Runner. Jesus Christ, watched it for the first time earlier this year. Haven't read the books, obviously. Haven't read any of the books of these. Maze Runner, surely one of the dumbest concepts of all time. Like, I watched the movie. They never explain the maze. Why? What is going on? Maybe I should watch the rest of them. Divergent, couldn't tell you a single thing about it. Definitely copycat. Definitely a copycat. Eragon, that was a flop. That was literally them being like, we need a Harry Potter. Oh, Eragon, dragons, cool. Fail. They just an absolute fail. Didn't even get a sequel. Nor did The Mortal Instruments. Tragic. And of course, Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. Tragic again. And the legacy, like, you know, I feel like that's sort of the order of the legacy there. Like, Twilight and Hunger Games are certainly like the biggest in terms of their fandom and appeal and reach. They were pretty big. Twilight was massive. Twilight was a phenomenon, particularly in teenage girls, but it was a huge phenomenon. And I've seen the first Twilight movie. And all I really remember is like Edward Cullen, who's Cedric Diggory, like saves her from a car. Is that happens? He like blocks the car. And then there's that moment where he's like, I'm 17. And she's like, how long have you been 17? And he's like, a very long time. Pretty pathetic though, to be honest. And here's the other thing that both Hunger Games and Twilight did that just pissed me off to no end. Of course, Harry Potter the films, they split the final book into 2 movies, part 1 and part 2. Now, they say it's because there's so much from the book to cram in that they want to do it justice. Cool, that's a good way of putting it, but, you know, Order of the Phoenix was much longer. That wasn't 2 parts, right? The real reason is because with 2 movies, you make 2 monies. With 2 movies, you make twice as much money. And then Twilight does their Breaking Dawn, parts 1 and 2, unnecessary, because it wasn't that big, but they just wanted to squeeze every possible dollar out of it. And Hunger Games did Mockingjay, part 1 and part 2. I'm going to actually look up like the box office return of the Twilight films. So the 5 movies made basically $3.35 billion. But I'm more curious on a film by film basis what they made. Breaking Dawn Part 2 made $820 million. Breaking Dawn Part 1, $712 million. Eclipse made 600. Yeah, so I don't think any of them made $1 billion. It was maybe 10 years ago that these were all coming out though, but you know, first one only made 400 million, whatever. The fact that they're now making a Twilight TV series and they announced it straight after the Harry Potter series was announced, and I have some thoughts on that. You can find them on YouTube or over on my other feed, the Harry Potter and the Boys podcast feed, which is my Harry Potter fan fiction podcast. I guess just like, why do I think Twilight is a bit pathetic? I don't know. I actually don't know. Maybe it is a really good story. Maybe it's just that I was a teenage boy and Twilight was like this thing where you're like, oh, what the hell? And Harry Potter was cool. And like Lord of the Rings was cool, but Twilight was like, oh, this sucks. And I have watched the first one. Maybe I have to watch all the Twilight movies. Maybe that's like a challenge for this show, like watching every Twilight movie and just seeing what I think. Because I know, like, here's what I know about Twilight. I know there's like Team Edward, Team Jacob, and that was like a big deal. I know Taylor Lautner is in it, of course, and Cedric Diggory and Christian Stewart. But aside from that, like I know they have a baby. That's right, they have a baby at the end that has like a weird name. All the Twilight fans are like, oh my God, Mike, fucking get it right. So I'm pretty sure she ends up with Edward, and does she not become a vampire herself? She like submits to being a vampire girl? I don't know. And I do like, you know, supernatural fantasy stuff like vampires and werewolves. That's cool. So maybe I watch all the Twilight movies, but I think, you know, with the Harry Potter series announced, they then announced the Twilight series. Genuinely would be unsurprised if we got a Hunger Games series. I know they were talking for a while about making a Percy Jackson series. And this is kind of what it is. Like, I guess back then it was like, we're going to make money by making these movies, but now it's sort of like we're going to make money by making these shows. It really is a sign of the times and how cinema and television has changed since, I guess, 2001 was when the first Harry Potter came out, and then the Lord of the Rings movies came out. Now it's all series. And yeah, it's a very fascinating turn of events to see that they're making these like shows now, as opposed to rebooting them as movies, which is what we used to do. Very, very interesting. But yeah, again, all of these books being adapted into films back in the sort of, you know, late 2000s, early 2010s. And I guess like when it comes to something like Twilight, I guess for me, I'm so interested in pop culture. So basically I'll watch anything. I'll literally like watch anything because I'm not interested as much in like the quality of a film, for example. I'm more interested in like the decisions being made for that pop culture sort of artifact to be represented in film. Like I'm interested in, for example, like when they made the Wednesday Addams TV show on Netflix, which was great, I then went to watch like the Addams Family movie, the live action one, because I was like, oh, I'm just interested to see how they adapt these characters across different mediums and how they've adapted them over time, or like something I'm about to talk about next, actually, you'll see, is similar. But yeah, very, very interesting. So yeah, I might try and watch all of the Twilight movies. The next thing I wanted to talk about, which is, yeah, on a similar sort of topic about pop culture. And this Instagram message came in from Radio JJ. Welcome to the RF. Thanks for getting in touch. This is your first contribution to the show, and I appreciate it and love you. He said, hey, Mr. Radio Mike. No need for Mr. Just you can even say RM. I'm a big fan of RM. Absolutely love the pods, but I only discovered them this year after you did the Four Finger Discount app. I was a guest on Four Finger Discount, a Simpsons podcast, with Dando and Guy, who have both been on Mike Talks. Lots of crossover in the Australian podcast industry. So go and check that out. I talked about the episode A Millhouse Divided, which is the great episode where Millhouse's parents get a divorce. He goes on, I've seen you on Hamish and Andy, but I didn't realise you did all this extra stuff. Man, story of my life. Anyway, with Lilo and Stitch, because I was talking last week about the Lilo and Stitch TV series. With Lilo and Stitch, did you ever watch the extra movies they did? I'm pretty sure from memory, they release all the experiments at the end of the last movie as a finale to the show. Got so much to say about Lilo and Stitch, to be honest. And the answer is yes, I have. So Disney is so interesting with the way they sort of manage their properties, because when you think about it, every single Disney movie that comes out, as long as it's like mildly successful, Disney will then basically do everything it can to squeeze as many pennies out of that franchise as possible. Example, like Aladdin, the movie Aladdin from the 90s, the Disney movie. You know, great movie, universally loved. They then did like some TV sequels, like so some movie sequels, Aladdin 2, like Return of Jafar, The King of Thieves and whatever. Then they had an Aladdin's Arabian Nights TV series, right? They just try to do everything with them. Similar, like The Lion King 2, then they did The Lion King 3 with Timon and Pumbaa. They then had like a TV series Lion King called The Lion Guard, the live action Lion King. Like they're always looking for ways to make money. Often they just do direct-to-DVD. They used to be direct-to-DVD sequels. That's what they used to call them. Like, they never got theatrical cinema releases. They were just cheaply made, put on DVDs. Hey, it's The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride. Go and watch this, kids. The Emperor's New Groove, they did a DVD sequel called Kronk's New Groove, and they did a TV series called The Emperor's New School. You know, getting kids to see those characters more. They do it a lot, like it, and maybe not as much these days, but even like I don't know what's another one. The Little Mermaid, they had a sequel. Tarzan, there was that Tarzan cartoon that used to play on Saturday Disney back when I was a kid here in Australia. Lilo and Stitch, no different. And I gotta say, Lilo and Stitch as a Disney movie, go and watch it. Because you probably haven't watched it since you were a kid, and I watched it during lockdown a few years ago. It is like genuinely one of the like best movies ever. It's got such an emotional core and emotional focus. It's genuinely like a really heartwarming movie about like family and like being an outsider, what makes someone family, etc., etc. It's just a really fun movie, and I think it's like, I mean, I think it's pretty popular, but I do think it's underrated. It's never held in the same regard as like the golden age 90s Disney movies like Lion King, Aladdin, Little Mermaid, Tarzan, all of that, right? It's sort of part of that, you know, dark age of Disney movies, but it's incredible. Radio JJ, my listener, wrote in and said there was a bunch of other stuff. So, and Lilo and Stitch was really funny because they obviously had Lilo and Stitch, the movie. Then the next thing that came out was like a direct-to-DVD movie just called Stitch the Movie. And that was like, they call it a backdoor pilot into the TV series, the cartoon. So that was like if you've seen it, it's the one I think where Lilo and Stitch go and rescue the electric experiment, and they introduce the idea of there's other experiments, that they're little pods and they can be activated by water, right? That's that. And that was a backdoor pilot into a series, which is when they basically do a movie or they basically just do a pilot for a TV series as part of something else, in this case a movie, and then they like start the series from there. So it was essentially like, the premiere of the show, and then they did the show. Then they did a direct-to-DVD sequel to Lilo and Stitch, and it was called Lilo and Stitch 2, Stitch Has a Glitch. So this is what I mean when I say like I'm just obsessed with pop culture, and my brain just like functions this way. Like I just remember it all. And I remember at the time, they would market this movie. There were ads for it on TV all the time. Lilo and Stitch 2, Stitch Has a Glitch. If someone could dig out that commercial, I remember it so well, all the time on kids' TV. And basically, I was really confused because I was like, didn't they already do like a Lilo and Stitch 2 with that Stitch movie? So it was like confusing for me as a kid. And that was like separate to the continuity of the TV show. It was like not set at the same time or whatever. And then when the TV show ended, they then did another movie that was essentially like the series finale of that show. And it was called Leroy and Stitch. There is another Lilo and Stitch movie called Leroy and Stitch. And that movie was, it was the series finale of the Lilo and Stitch TV show. And I'm pretty sure, like I've definitely seen it. The premise is that there's another Stitch after 626, because Stitch is 626. There's another Stitch, like a better, let's get deep into Lilo and Stitch lore here, okay? If you haven't seen the movie, these evil scientists are creating all these experiments to like give world domination or to do different things. And then Stitch was experiment 626, and he was like he was supposed to like be this super weapon essentially, but he was too nice. And I'm pretty sure 625 maybe was in the TV show, and he was like a yellow version of Stitch, but he only made sandwiches. Like it was like a glitch essentially. And then, so in Leroy and Stitch, they make, maybe it's 627 or 628, they make that, and he's called Leroy, and he's like a red version of Stitch, except he's like actually hell-bent on world domination. And in that movie, they show all of the 626 experiments, and they like all get their time to shine. So the answer to basically, the short answer to your question, JJ, is yes. I am familiar with the Lilo and Stitch extended universe. And funnily enough, I think they just revealed that they're doing a live-action Lilo and Stitch. In this trend of doing live-action versions of every Disney movie, they're doing a live Lilo and Stitch. Would love to see what Stitch looks like in live-action. And apparently they're getting the same voice actor to voice him, which makes sense, because it's like Stitch's voice is iconic. And I will never hear the word Ohana and like a tear not start to form in my eye, because I'm like, oh, Ohana means family. Family means no one gets left behind or forgotten. Love a bit of Stitch. One thing I did want to talk about with Lilo and Stitch, though, is the character Pleakley. Do you guys remember that character Pleakley, who's like the tall, lanky, slender alien with one eye? That kind of looks like Mike Wazowski if he was like stretched out. And just a queer icon. Pleakley from Lilo and Stitch was a queer icon. This guy, he's in drag. He's just like so obviously gay without it ever explicitly being mentioned in the show. But he's just like this proudly gay alien who like loves all of his friends. Loves doing drag. Kind of reminds me of James from Team Rocket in Pokemon. Like, it's never, like, addressed in the show, which I think is, like, it was really progressive for its time, but James from Team Rocket, just a queer icon. Like, constantly in drag, very obviously gay, like very effeminate, and like, I don't know, I just think they're great characters, like for representation. Because as a kid, you see James in drag and you're just like, oh yeah, I guess James just likes doing drag. And it just like normalizes it. I actually think it, like, even Pleakley, I think like normalizes the idea of drag, I guess. I don't know. I just found them really interesting. Okay, a couple more things on today's show. I wanted to clear up some of my thoughts from last week's episode where I talked about the Barbie movie, because I got into a little Twitter debate with listener of the show and friend, so, you know, all peaceful, I assume, Radio Jaden. Because I did this tweet saying that, like, you know, it's very interesting from a marketing angle for the Barbie movie. Like, how do you get people into that movie? Like, it's a Greta Gerwig movie. It's obviously, like, you know, there's a demographic there that wants to see this movie. But it's like, there's like a demographic, like, you know, whether it's, you know, gays, ladies, like all of that will definitely go and see this movie. But like the point I was trying to make is that, like, movies are products being sold. So like the idea of movies is to make as much money as possible. Sorry, not all the time, but generally, if a movie does not make back its money, if a movie cannot even break even, well, breaking even isn't good, then it's a flop, and that's discouraging for people to continue making similar movies like that. I think the Barbie movie will definitely make money. I'm just curious about how they want to market it, because I think when you have Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling in a film, these are like your AAA tier actors who are going to be getting paid tons and tons of money for this, and they have appeal to all audiences. I think it makes sense to leverage those actors to try and get as many people interested in the Barbie movie as possible, even those outside of your general sort of demographic that you're targeting. And I think with AAA actors like that, you want a big audience. You really want a huge audience. And my worry was just that, like, not my worry, but I guess my question is, like, how it wasn't even really a statement on what I think the film's going to do. It was more just like, if you are working as like the head of marketing on that movie, what would you do to try and get people to see this movie who would otherwise have no interest in it? Because that's what marketing is, right? And Jaden brought up the movie Air, which is this new movie about like Michael Jordan. I think, honestly, I'm a bit ignorant. I don't know too much about it. And I'm not interested in basketball. I'm not interested in Michael Jordan. So I haven't seen the film. And Jaden said, well, I've seen the film and I don't like basketball. I don't know anything about it, but I really enjoyed the movie. And I said, yeah, I'm sure if I saw the movie, I'd enjoy it, but I have no interest to go and pay for a ticket to go and see it, and no real interest to watch it. I'm sure if I did watch it, it would be good, but I have no motivation or interest to watch it. It's not being marketed to me, which is fine. I just think it's interesting to think about how you do market these things. Because again, Air is not marketed to someone like me because I don't like basketball. I think Barbie is being marketed pretty well because it's sort of showing it as it's not just this like Barbie movie, like there's something more to it, and it's interesting and it's fantastical and it's like, you know, a little bit abstract, a little bit of like auteurship going into this, of course, with Greta Gerwig. And I think I even brought up like the Super Mario Brothers movie and how that movie is doing so well commercially, and it's also doing so well with fans of Super Mario who are like the demographic of that film. I think kids and Super Mario fans or Nintendo fans are the demographic of that film, and it's succeeding. And they've got people in. They've got the kids in, they've got the parents in, and they've got the fans in. I'm just curious as to how Barbie goes about doing that with a toy that is traditionally female-based. They don't have to do it. I don't care if they do it. I'm just curious from a marketing angle, when you've got two AAA stars, what can you do to get people in? And Jaden also mentioned that it's like we only have these discussions around films that are female lead centric, which I probably agree with, and that's a double standard. And by even talking about it, I'm ingraining this double standard and reinforcing this double standard. But I kind of disagree with that. Like, I'm just sort of trying to reflect and comment on the reality of the situation, which is that generally speaking, Barbies are a toy for girls. Very generally speaking. In fact, the demographic for Barbie was girls. You know, I'm not saying boys can't play with Barbies or anything like that. I just think the name Barbie, the brand Barbie, screams young female demographic, right? And yeah, I just think that's a reality. I think that, unfortunately, I don't think this is a good thing, but I do think it's a reality that men are less likely to see a movie with a female lead. I don't know why. We could talk and debate for hours as to why that is and what our society and what our culture entails to make that a reality. But I don't think it's wrong to comment on that being a fact and a reality of life. Like, it just is. And that sucks, but it just is. And I am like a pop culture commentator, so I'm just talking about that. I'm excited for the Barbie movie. I think it's going to be really good. I genuinely am just curious from the angle of marketing and sales and brand awareness, what you would do. I'm not saying they have to, but to maximize profits, which I imagine they want to do with such a star-studded cast of AAA actors, how do you market your film to a broader audience than the demo who is definitely going to see it? And I guarantee you those conversations are happening with whichever studio the film is being developed by, because they want people to see it. They want to make as much money off this movie as possible. Wanted to talk a little bit more about something I touched on last week, which got a really good reception. Got really good reception last week on the show, which is AFL Mascots. I talked all about some of the AFL Mascots last week, which people really enjoyed. It went a bit viral on TikTok, so I wanted to just look at a few more. Obviously, it's my big year of footy, and message came in from Patreon Lazar, one of our Patreon supporters, patreon.com/Radio Mike, Get the Pat and Mike show every Friday. Good show. Because last week I talked about Port Adelaide. He said Port Adelaide actually no longer like to be called Port Power. They've been stepping away from that name for years, and now they just want to be Port Adelaide, which I thought was really interesting, because I remember when Greater Western Sydney came in, because they're one of the new AFL teams, they were like, oh, we don't want to have like a thing. You know, all the teams have their like Brisbane Lions, Geelong Cats. You know, they're generally animals. GWS was like, nah, we don't want one. Or maybe Gold Coast was like, we don't want one. But then GWS is the Giants now. But I don't know about, I mean, I'm sure, Lazar, you know more about footy than me, but is the Port Adelaide theme song not all about power, and their thing is Port Power? And their theme song is, we got the power to win, the power to, Port Adelaide. I don't know it. Anyway, someone sent something in about that. Looked at a few more of the mascots. They are all really interesting, and I have one little take on them, but the GWS mascot is a guy called G-Man, and G-Man basically just looks like they traced Wreck-It Ralph from the Disney movie Wreck-It Ralph and just changed it a little bit and maybe made it look like it was made on like a low budget animation studio, not Disney. But the G-Man is just this like Wreck-It Ralph kind of meets young Donald Trump. He's absolutely jacked, and he's holding a footy in his hand that's very small. He's holding it with 2 fingers, which does imply that he is in fact a giant. But yeah, to me, it's Wreck-It Ralph crossed with like 18-year-old Jack Donald Trump. The Fremantle mascot is really funny. It's Johnny the Docker. Fremantle, of course, are the Dockers. And the Fremantle mascot, he kind of looks like that kid at your school who was friends with all the bullies but didn't actively bully. So he was like friends with all the bullies and all the bullies bullied people, and he didn't bully, but he also knew it was wrong but stood by and never said anything. And now he's like, now you sometimes see him and he's like this really chilled out surfer dude who everyone loves and is friends with, but there's never been any accountability for him being a silent bystander to your bullying. That's kind of what Johnny the Doc Docker looks like. That's how I would describe him. Look him up. Like everybody knows a Johnny the Doc Docker. Everybody knows one. Send it in. Who's your Johnny the Doc Docker? Now, St. Kilda's mascot, of course, the Saints, is, and this is where it sort of gets interesting, because it's his name is Trevor Kilda, and the thing about Trevor Kilda, and this is sort of bringing in a comparison to last week as well, but Trevor St. Kilda, in a theme that is becoming common with a lot of the AFL mascots, does look a lot like Mr. Incredible. Not gonna lie, because last week I think I said that the Carlton mascot looked a lot like Mr. Incredible crossed with Captain America. But Trevor St. Kilda really does look like it just is Mr. Incredible from The Incredibles. Go and look him up. There is, from the blonde hair to the chiseled jawline and the muscles, to me, Trevor St. Kilda is just Mr. Incredible. And I would hazard a guess that there are a number of AFL mascots that do look a lot like Mr. Incredible, because so far 2 of the 18 teams, therefore 1 in 9, have Mr. Incredible-like qualities to them. Next week I'll do another 3 mascots. This has been a fun app. I've got an extended version of this. The plug. Okay, so of course the first thing I want to plug is the Patreon, patreon.com/RadioMike. Guys, this is an independent podcast. Everything is self-funded, self-time. No one's doing anything you see from me as being done. It's just me and Pat here at Radio Mike Productions. And we do a podcast on the Patreon, which is a bonus you can get at the $4.50 tier and above. Of course, you can support us $1 a month, patreon.com/Radio Mike. You get your name in the credits for all my YouTube videos, but the Pat and Mike show is our main product. It is so much fun. Here's a little snippet from a recent Pat and Mike show in which Pat discovers that convicted Australian drug offender Chappelle Corby now sells handmade clocks.
Chappelle Corby has taken up making clocks. She's not selling them through her website. She's selling them through her stories, made by myself. $1.99 free express shipping. Direct message me. You're meant to just DM Chappelle Corby, get a clock.
She doesn't have a checkout.
We need to buy one of Chappelle Corby's clocks.
It's a good story, isn't it?
Oh, cool clock. Yep, Chappelle Corby made it.
It's a Corby. Do you reckon she learned how to make clocks all that time she spent in prison just to count down the 20 years? The theme to the Pat and Mike show is the SpongeBob theme. Find out why on the Pat and Mike show. Another thing we want to start doing on the Patreon, because we've just revamped the Patreon, we might do a little bonus pod sort of explaining all of that. And please jump on again. We'd really appreciate it. Me and Pat are going to try and do a monthly stream of a game, like playing a game together. But also, and I've been doing this thing on my Instagram where I've been putting out to my followers, can you beat me at Super Smash Brothers? And I've been playing online Smash Bros with followers of mine, trying to see if they can beat me. So far, no one has beaten me, and I've been putting them on my Instagram stories, but people have been asking for full videos of these, which I've decided I'm going to put up on the Patreon. So if you want to see me playing you guys in Super Smash Bros, here's a little snippet of one guy I beat without him touching me once. See what we can do with my boy Ness. Probably my best character, or at least the character I enjoy the most. There you go. First stock, he didn't even touch me. And that's a good sign for what's to come. You catch them in that first PK fire and you can do so much damage and so many kind of combos out of that. It's really fun playing as him because people honestly can't touch you. I also wanted to say I'm living the dream. Like, I realized when planning the plug this week, like, I'm living the dream. I'm doing a lot of on-air stuff, which is so much fun. I'm on Two Guys, One Cup every week with Will and Charlie. It's my bigger year of footy, and most of the bigger year of footy stuff is happening over there. This week I bought a pack of footy cards to unwrap on the show. Here's how that went. Is there actually a game that you play with the cards, or are they literally just collectible trading cards?
They're called you use the word itself. They're called trading cards.
Yeah.
You trade them.
You trade them.
Not to bring it back to Pokemon cards,
I
but
guess you were gonna.
you had they were Pokemon trading cards, but there was also like a game you could play. But maybe they're just a little bit ahead of the AFL.
Well, there's also a game associated with those cards. It's called AFL football.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a really big game.
You might have heard of it. There's actually a game happening right now.
Look over your shoulder. In the background, you'll be able to actually see the game that's associated with these cards.
Every week I'm on the radio on 3AW with DD Dunleavy talking movies and TV shows at 2:30 p.m. on Wednesdays, and that's going really well.
And if you want to watch a good science fiction series,
Andor is another Star Wars TV series, and I have been trying to get you to watch The Mandalorian for many weeks, but you have refused. Maybe David's recommendation of Andor gets you over the line. There you go, guys. I tried.
He's gone. We've cut his line off. That's it.
And this week I pop up on the Hamish and Andy show talking about Harry Potter related stuff.
Because you didn't want to cause a scene or burn me too hard in front of my friends. You sent me a text there just as we finished saying, by the way, mate, Griffin's got the head of an eagle as well. Right. And I assume that's the Harry Potter version of the Griffin.
I don't think Griffin appears in Harry Potter, as far as I'm aware.
Doesn't one bite Malfoy or something?
That's a hippogriff.
Oh, sorry.
You're a hypocrite.
I'm having a blast, and I'm popping up all over the place, really enjoying it. So, yeah, just wanted to say thanks for your ongoing support. Harry Potter and the boys will be back soon. Me and Sam have been enjoying a little break. Of course, Pat and Mike, again, I want to plug that again. Please sign up to the Patreon if you like this show. And please, before you go, rate the podcast on Spotify 5 stars. Even if you don't listen on Spotify, just play an episode, scroll through, and then it lets you rate it. Please rate it 5 stars. It really does indicate sort of where we're at with the pod and lets other people see that the pod is good and people like it. So yeah, thank you so much for listening, guys. I really appreciate it. And I will see you next week. Bye-bye. This podcast was a Radio Mike original production. Head to radiomike.com.au to check out all our other content, stay up to date at radio.mike on Instagram, and get in touch, radiomikepod@gmail.com.